All right, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to the Dharma Doors. I'm MC Owens, and tonight we're going to read another sutta. We're diving back into the Majjhima Nikāya. We are moving ahead to sutta number 98 this evening. This is going to be the Vāseṭṭha Sutta. Vāseṭṭha is a Brahmin, and as you know, we are making our way through this little section of 10 little suttas, and they're all teachings that the Buddha gave to Brahmins. So the Brahmins are the connective sort of theme of this section. This is going to be our eighth of the 10 suttas to the Brahmins. Um, Little bit of backstory on this particular sutta tonight. So, um, this is one of those suttas that actually appears a few different times. So this popped up a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago. And what it is that you may know that there is this other part of the Pali Canon called the Sutta Nipata. This is part of the fifth Nikaya, the fifth gathering of teachings. And in the Sutta Nipata, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suttas, but you'll notice that in the third major section, there is a sutta that is the Vāseṭṭha Sutta. And it's the exact same sutta that we're reading tonight, except this has commentary. So what it is that it's the whole sutra, but sort of like in between each line, there's like some commentary, a little bit of description. I went through this. I pulled out a few little nuggets that I'll share with you. But there's more, though. There's more, though, to this sutta tonight. So, first of all, it has a whole commentary in this. So, that's kind of significant. But the other thing is, as you know, every Sunday we put the link to the sutta online, and we put the link to a website called Sutta Central. Amazing website, amazing organization, right? Really committed to preserving all of these early teachings of the Buddha. Well, if you go to Sutta Central and you go to the section that we're reading, each of the entries, it has a translation usually by Bhikkhu Sujato, and that's usually the link that I kind of give to Nome. I really like Bhikkhu Sujato. Um, I don't have a printed version of that translation, which is why I'm usually using Bhikkhu Nyanamoli. But Sutta Central also has Bhikkhu Nyanamoli's translation as well. I use Sutta Central a lot because it has the original Pali. So if you want to know what the real, like the actual words are that are being used, you definitely want to have a Pali edition. But then, this is why I'm bringing this up. At the very bottom of the entry for this sutta, there's a section, and what it is it says parallels in ancient texts. And what this is that, as I have noted many times in Dharma Doors, a lot of time these sutras kind of recycle material, and we'll find that the same teaching has been taught different places. Well, this is a great tool to locate those other references. Now, normally, for example, if I were to quickly go through these, the very, very first sutta in this Brahmanya section, it has a 20 ancient parallels. The next one has 18. There's 18 other references. The third one only has three other references. So that's kind of an obscure little sutra. Then we get into a few more. But then when we come to the sutta that we're talking about tonight, this one has 262 other references. Most of those other references are going to be references to the Buddha's gatha, the Buddha's poem. So in this sutra tonight, the Buddha is going to answer a bunch of questions. Actually, he's only going to answer one question, but he's going to answer it in a long poem. And this poem is famous. This poem is used all over the place. So I'm really excited to share this with you tonight because it is such an important point, or such an important teaching. So, yeah, cannot stress that enough. Next up, though, actually, let's introduce the setting and the characters, but I have one more kind of background thing to tell you about. But let's dive in real quick, though. So again, this is Sutta 98 in the Majjhima Nikāya. This is the Vāseṭṭha Sutta. And it goes a little something like this. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One, the Buddha, was living at Ichchanalagala in the woods near Ichchanagala. Now, on that occasion, a number of well-known, well-to-do Brahmins, they were all staying in Ichchanagala. That is, the Brahmin Chanki, the Brahmin Tarukkaha, the Brahmin Pokarisati, the Brahmin Janusoni, the Brahmin Todeya, and other well-known, well-to-do Brahmins. Then, while the Brahmin students Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja, while those two Brahmin students were walking and wandering for exercise, this discussion arose between them. Now, we're not even going to get to the discussion just yet. I want to talk just for a moment about Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja. So, Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja are these two Brahmins. I'm going to let you know ahead of time. At the end of the sutra, they kind of convert to Buddhism. But what I want you to know is that the Brahmins, Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja, they occur, or they pop up in two sutras in the Digha Nikāya. And what the point that I want to note is that these two, this is like they are always together. They're always referenced together. So, and they joined the monastic order together. So there's that. But I just kind of want us to know that these two Brahmins, they have like a kind of a allegorical history in the suttas in that way. And what it is that they're always getting into arguments with each other. And then because they can't settle the dispute themselves, they go to the Buddha to settle the dispute. And I just kind of wanted to bring this up because, when we study suttas, one way to think about this is that these two monks were always fighting. And they just kept getting into these fights, and those fights were recorded. Or maybe they only got into one fight, and it has become like a trope, right? Where, remember that time that Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja were fighting? And then it just becomes like a thing where they're always fighting. Or Maybe they never even got into a fight, but somebody told a story about them getting into a fight. Or there was never even a Vāseṭṭha and a Bharadavaja, and then somebody told a story about two made-up monks getting in a fight. I don't know. So I just want you to know that these two guys pop up in the suttas a lot, and who knows why. But oh, and by the way, in the I believe it's sutta number 13. It's interesting because in sutta number 13 in the Digha Nikāya, Vāseṭṭha and Bharadavaja, they go to the Buddha with a question. The Buddha blows their minds and they convert. But that's going to happen in tonight's sutra. How many times did these guys convert? Again, if you're really stuck on like the history, these points will bother you. But if you understand these things as allegory and story, and then these things are not troublesome. So, oh, and by the way, they eventually become fully ordained monks in the other sutta in the Digha Nikāya. So, okay, but let's see what they've gotten themselves up to this time. So the two Brahmins are wandering, and I got to tell you, I'm going to add something to this little exchange. I want to tell you about something because it's going to come up later on. So what it is that when Vāseṭṭha and Bharadavaja were walking and wandering for exercise, this discussion arose between them. Now, what it says is, how is one a Brahmin? The Brahmin student Bharadavaja said, when one is well born on both sides of pure maternal and paternal descent, 7 generations back, unassailable and impeccable in respect to birth, then one is a Brahmin. The Brahmin student Vāseṭṭha said, no, when one is virtuous and fulfills the observances, then one is a Brahmin. Now, in the original Pali, there's a really important word that for some reason they're not translating. They only translate it one time, and that's not till actually the next paragraph. What it is these sentences, it should read something like this. This discussion arose between them. And the question is, how is it, sir, that one is a Brahmin? And what it is it says, how is it, Bho, so B-H-O, is this word for sir. And it's kind of, it's like this, it reminds me a lot of like the modern use of the word bro, where it's this kind of like, interjection type of a thing. So these sentences is, how is it, Bho? How is it, Bho, that one is a Brahmin? The Brahmin student Bharadavaja said, when one is well born on both sides, Bho, sir, of pure maternal and paternal descent going 7 generations back, unassailable and impeccable, then one's a Brahmin. But the Brahmin student Vāseṭṭha said, when one is virtuous, Bho, sir, and fulfills observances, then one is a Brahmin. All right. It'll make sense later on. But I just want you to know that that's the real nature of their discourse is this, oh, no, sir, it's this way. No, sir, it's this way. But the Brahmin student Bharadavaja could not convince the Brahmin student Vāseṭṭha, nor could the Brahmin student Vāseṭṭha convince the Brahmin student Bharadavaja. Then the Brahmin student Vāseṭṭha addressed the Brahmin student Bharadavaja, saying, "Beho, sir, the recluse Gautama, the son of the Sakyans who went forth from a Sakyan clan, is living at Ichtananagala, in the woods near Ichtananagala." Now, a good report of Master Gautama has been spread about to this effect. That blessed one, Arahat, is fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime one, a knower of worlds, incomparable leader of heroes, heroes to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened Buddha, blessed one. Come, Bharadavaja, let's go to the recluse Gautama and ask him about this matter. As he answers, so will we remember it. Yes, Beho. Yes, sir, the Brahmin student Bharadavaja replied. Then the two Brahmin students, Vāseṭṭha and Bharadavaja, went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, they sat down at one side, and the Brahmin student, Vāseṭṭha, addressed the Blessed One in a gattaha, in verse, saying, "We are both acknowledged to possess the knowledge we claim of the triple Veda. For I am Pokarisati's pupil, and he is a pupil of Tarukkaha. We have both attained full mastery over all that the Vedic experts teach. Skilled in philology and grammar, we match our teachers in recitation. A dispute has arisen between us, Gautama, concerning the question of birth and class. Bharadavaja says one is Brahmin by jati. Jati is by birth. While I, Vāseṭṭha, I hold that one is a Brahmin because of karma, because of action. Know this, O seer, this is our debate. Since neither of us could convince the other one, or make him see his point of view, we have come to ask you, sir, widely famed to be a Buddha. As people turn with pressed palms upraised towards the moon when it starts to wax, so too in the world do they venerate you and pay homage to you, O Gautama. So now we ask you, Gautama, the I uprisen in the world, is one a Brahmin by birth or by action? Explain to us, who do not know, how we should recognize a Brahmin. All right. So Vāseṭṭha has asked the question to the Buddha, and I just want to make super clear. I want to highlight that the question, and by the way, let's not forget that this is the section on the Brahmins, right? So this whole section of sutras has been about what is it? What is a Brahmin? And now this sutra, we are getting down to it. This is the question that Vāseṭṭha and Bharadavaja have. What makes somebody a Brahmin? Are you just born that way? Or is it based on actions? Is it based on karma? Now, lest we forget, or lest we kind of don't catch the insignificance here, this is a huge question. And what I mean is, I mean, it's huge in the context of the caste system, this idea about being born into a certain station and the idea that birth is like an indicator of like what you're supposed to do with your life in that way. So this is a huge question in the context of India, in the context of the caste system. But let's move even further beyond that. This is a question about genetics. This is a question about whether your like lot in life is genetically determined or action determined. So I want to really emphasize that even though they're talking kind of in this very, specific religious sense of what makes one a Brahmin, I really want us to be able to extrapolate the question to its broadest extent, where they are really talking about so many things. So, all right. So now the Buddha, by the way, is going to answer also in verse. And I think the whole rest of the sutra, basically the whole rest of the sutra is this poem. And again, this is like a very, very famous poem of the Buddha. The Buddha is going to answer Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja, and he's going to approach or address the question of birth, and then he's going to approach the question of karma, Vāseṭṭha's position, and then the Buddha is going to give his position. So I don't want, just because he's going to start off by kind of putting down birth, we want to pay really close attention and not think that the Buddha is necessarily siding with Vāseṭṭha. But let's begin with the Buddha, what the Buddha has to say about jati. Jati is this idea of birth. So, and because this is a poem, the choice of words is so significant because there's no wasting syllables here. So the Buddha says, I teach you in order as they really are, Vāseṭṭha, said the Blessed One, the generic divisions of living beings. For many are the different kinds of birth. By the way, in alternate translation, the Bhikkhu Sujato translation, the Buddha seems to be giving a kind of a disclaimer where he says the generic divisions. He's basically saying, I know this is overgeneralized, so don't get on me about the specifics, all right? So these are the generic divisions of living beings. Know first the grass and the trees. Though they lack self-awareness, their birth is their distinctive characteristic or their distinctive mark, for many are the kinds of birth. Next comes the moths and butterflies, and so on, through to ants and termites. Their birth is their distinctive mark, for many are the kinds of birth. Then know the different kinds of quadrupeds of various sorts, both small and large. Their birth is their distinctive mark, for many are the kinds of birth. Know those whose bellies are their feet, to wit, the long-backed class of snakes. Their birth is their distinctive mark, for many are the kinds of birth. Know too the water-dwelling fish, that pasture in the liquid world. Their birth is their distinctive mark, for many are the kinds of birth. Next, Know the birds that wing their way as they range in open skies. Their birth is their distinctive mark, for many are their kinds of birth. Now, while in these births, the differences of birth make their distinctive mark, with humans, no differences of birth make a distinctive mark in them, nor in the hairs on their head, nor in their head, nor in the ears, nor in their eyes, nor in their mouth, nor in their nose, nor in their lips, nor in their brows, nor in their shoulders, nor in their neck, nor in their belly or the back, nor in the buttocks or the breast, not in the genitals or in their ways of mating, nor in the hands and feet, nor in the fingernails or fingers or nails, nor in the knees, nor in the thighs, nor in their color, nor in their voice. Here, birth makes no distinctive mark, as with the other kinds of birth. In human bodies, in themselves, nothing distinctive can be found. Distinction among human beings is purely verbal designations. All right, so that concludes the Buddha's first answer about birth. As I understand what the Buddha said, he's basically saying, like, yeah, what makes a bird and not a snake or not a bug is because it's born differently. It's got a different yoni. So yoni is the word that's being referred to as the type of birth. So it's a different situation. You got eggs when you're dealing with birds, right? But what he's saying is that, yeah, what makes a bird is it's born differently. But he's saying that among humans, we're all born the same way. So yeah, you have different hair color, different eyes, different skin, all of these things he's saying, but that doesn't make any distinctions in that way. There are differences in that way, truly. But this idea of, and by the way, we have to keep in mind, there is this implicit thing where they are talking about the caste system. They remember, they're talking about what makes a Brahmin a Brahmin. Are they a Brahmin because they're born that way? And the Buddha's saying no, because every human is born the same way. So, and we've seen this before actually in some other Brahmin sutras where the Buddha's like, don't the Brahmin women menstruate? Don't they give birth like any other caste? Like, isn't their birthing process exactly like everybody else's birthing process? So that's the Buddha's position on birth. And it's kind of an interesting one, a very powerful one, to say that no, 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 all human beings, we're all the family of man in that way, that family of humans, because we're all born the same way. All right, everybody okay with the Buddha's first answer? He's definitely saying, by the way, when he says distinctions among human beings is purely verbal designations, he's referring specifically, this is based on the commentary, but he's referring to this idea that being a Brahmin is a human language designation. It's not a biological designation, is what the Buddha's saying. Like there's not a Brahmin gene, is what the Buddha's saying. Or again, this is what the interpretation is. It's how I understand it. So, okay, so everybody's okay with that passage? Now, we of course would think, oh, if the Buddha doesn't agree with Bharadavaja and doesn't agree that it's through birth, then he must agree with Vāseṭṭha, right? Not necessarily. So I'm moving on to verse 19. This is where the Buddha starts to talk about karma. So this is Vāseṭṭha's position. He says, somebody that makes their living by agriculture, you should know that they're called a farmer, Vāseṭṭha. They are not a Brahmin. Somebody that makes their living among men through a variety of crafts, you should know that they are called a craftsman, Vāseṭṭha. They are not a Brahmin. Somebody who makes their living by way of merchandise, you should know they're called a merchant, Vāseṭṭha. Yeah, they're not a Brahmin. Somebody who makes their living by serving others, you should know they're called a servant, Vāseṭṭha. They are not a Brahmin. Somebody that makes their living by stealing, you should know they're called a robber, Vāseṭṭha. They're not a Brahmin. Somebody who makes their living by means of archery, you should know they're called a soldier, Vāseṭṭha. They're not a Brahmin. Somebody who makes their living through priestly craft, you should know, Vāseṭṭha, that they're called a yajako, a chaplain, or a sacrificer. They are not a Brahmin. I call him not a Brahmin because of origin and lineage. If impediments still lurk within, they're just somebody who says, Baho. So we've come to the end of the Buddha, at least the end of the Buddha talking about karma. And here he's saying, yeah, if somebody does the karma of a farmer, they're called a farmer. If somebody performs the karma of a servant, they're called a servant, right? And then so the Buddha goes through all of these different performances of action and says, yeah, if somebody's performing that action, they're called, and remember the language here is so important, they're called a farmer or a servant or what have you. Then the Buddha concludes by saying, I call him not a Brahmin because of origin and lineage. If impediments, if obstacles still lurk within that person, then they're just somebody that says sir or Baho. And the Brahmins are known for this turn of phrase, that they're the ones that say Baho all the time. And they call each other bro all the time in that way. So the Buddha is saying that if somebody is still has impediments, then they're just somebody that keeps saying bro all the time, and they're not actually a Brahmin. Okay, so that was the Buddha denying jati, denying birth, and denying karma. Now let's hear what the Buddha has to say. And by the way, this is verse 27. And verse 27, he starts by saying what is not a Brahmin. And then he says, one who is unimpeded and clings no more, that's what I call a Brahmin. And before I kind of go through the rest of this real quick, a little bit about language. So I want you to know, of course, in this version, you know, it's tricky. Translation is tricky. But in this version, it would read, one who is unimpeded and clings no more, he is one I call a Brahmin. And then, of course, for the rest of the poem, or at least for a big chunk of the rest of the poem, the last little couplet is always the same, meaning that's what I call a Brahmin. Now, if you read Bhikkhu Sujato's translation, he avoids the pronoun problem. And I agree. Of course, I always want to avoid the pronoun problem, but it's particularly important in this case because, one, as far as I can tell, the original Pali does not necessitate a pronoun because it's about that's what I call a Brahmin. All right. So Bhikkhu Sujato does not have a pronoun because he's translating the Pali a little more grammatically properly in that way. So the first reason to not keep repeating the male pronoun in that way, the first reason is the Pali doesn't really necessitate it. But the second reason is that this is a beautiful poem about what it means to be enlightened or awakened. And because the Buddha is talking generally about what it is to be awakened or enlightened, we want this to be open to everybody. If he were referring to himself as the Brahmin, then it would be appropriate, of course, to say he, because the Buddha is understood to be, identifying as a male in that way, or the tradition identifies it that way. So I'm going to do my best to stick with the Sujato translation, even though I'm reading from this version. So everybody, disclaimer, excellent. So, and actually, I think what I'm going to do is, yeah, it's not that big of a poem. So allow me to regale you with this beautiful poem, and then we'll backtrack and talk about specific words and specific phrases that I think are really beautiful. But I'd love for you to just hear the whole kind of, the whole thing unfold. So, backing up to where the Buddha begins his description of what a Brahmin really is, one who is unimpeded and clings no more. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has cut off all fetters and is no more by anguish shaken, who has overcome all ties, detached. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has cut each strap and cut each thong, the reins and the bridle band as well, whose crossbear has been lifted, an awakened one. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who endures without a trace of hate. No abuse, no violence, no bondage too. With strength and strength of patience well arrayed. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who doesn't flare up with anger, dutiful, virtuous, and humble, subdued, bearing their final body. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who, like rain on a lotus flower, or like mustard seed on the point of an awl, clings not at all to sensual pleasures. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who knows right here within themselves the destruction of dukkha, of suffering, with the burden lowered and detached. That's what I call a Brahmin. Who with deep understanding, wise, can tell the path from what is not the path, and has attained the goal supreme. That's what I call a Brahmin. Aloof alike from householders, as well as those who have gone into homelessness. one who wanders without home or wish. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has laid aside the rod against all beings, frail or bold. One who does not kill, nor have others killed. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who is unopposed among opponents, peaceful among those given to violence. One who does not cling among those who cling. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has dropped all lust and hate, dropped all conceit and contempt, like mustard seed on the point of an awl. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who utters speech that is free from harmfulness or harshness. One whose speech is full of meaning, ever truthful, which doesn't offend anyone. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who in the world will never take what has not been given, long or short, small or big, fair or foul. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has no more inner yearnings regarding this world or the next, who lives unyearning and detached. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has no more indulgences, no more perplexity since they know. One who has gained a firm footing in the deathless. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has transcended all ties of both merit and evil deeds. One who is sorrowless, stainless, and pure. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who, pure and spotless as the moon, is clear and limpid, and in whom delight and being have been destroyed. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has passed beyond the swamp, the mire of samsara, beyond all delusion. One who has crossed to the far shore and meditates within the jhanas, who is unperturbed, unperplexed, attained to nirvana through not clinging. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has abandoned sensual pleasures and wanders here in homelessness with sense desires and being destroyed. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has abandoned craving too and wanders here homeless with craving and being both destroyed. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who leaves behind all human bonds and has also cast off the bonds of heaven, detached from all bonds everywhere. That's what I call a Brahmin. Who leaves behind delight and discontent, who is cool and acquisitionless, a hero who has transcended the whole world. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who knows how beings pass away and reappear in many modes. Unclutching, sublime, awake. That's what I call a Brahmin. One whose destination is unknown, unknown to gods, to spirits, and to humans. An arahat with taints destroyed. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who has no impediments at all. None before, none behind, none in the middle. One who is unimpeded and clings no more. That's what I call a Brahmin. The herd's leader, the perfected hero, the great seer, whose victory has been won, unperturbed, cleansed, awakened. That's what I call a Brahmin. One who knows their manifold past lives and sees the heavens and the states of woe, who has reached the destruction of birth. That's what I call a Brahmin. For name and clan, name and clan are assigned as mere designations in the world, originating in mere conventions. They are assigned here and there. All right, let's pause there. Yeah, let's pause there and go through the Buddha's description of what is a Brahmin for him, and then we'll do the last little part of the poem there. So that's the famous part of the poem, the Buddha's description of what a Brahmin really is. And what we want to notice is that it's not exactly, well, it's definitely not birth, but it's not exactly karma either. It's, in a way, you could kind of call it anti-karma. And I would call it anti-karma. That would just be a Michaelism. But I would call it that because what we're talking about is all of the references to non-attachment. That's what I'm calling anti-karma in that way. So one is not a Brahmin because of what they do. They're kind of a Brahmin because of what they don't do in that way. All right, so any of those before I kind of just start choosing ones at random? Anything in there jump out at anybody as either confusing or really enlightening, very beautiful? Anybody? Comments, questions? All right. Noe.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Uh, so the Brahmin. Yes, a Brahmin. So far in so use the terminology arhats. We've used the terminology Brahmins. We've used in modern times. We use the terminology of Buddhists. Could you expound a little bit about how that connects with all of this? Is it the same thing? I know
Okay,
Brahmin is the Hindu. Yes. So that's my
great.
question.
Great question, Noe. It's a great question because I have a note and I totally forgot to mention it, but I guess I was just waiting for Noe to ask. So let's talk about this terminology. So let's start with Brahmin. So here's the thing about the word Brahmin. The root of it, of course, is that word Brahma. And Brahma is God. But let's remember, in the world of Buddhism, there's two gods. There's the god of desire, and there's the creator god. Brahma is the creator god, like in many ways considered like the highest god, because Brahma created the universe, sustains the universe. Chakra, chakra is like Zeus. Chakra is like if you need a new car, you should talk to Chakra Indra. But don't go talking to Brahma about getting a new car or something. Brahma doesn't have anything to do with earthly desires. He's busy creating the universe. My point is that Brahma is like God. And so a Brahmin, well, the first kind of definition of a Brahmin is somebody who is in a relationship with Brahma in that way, just like the way a Christian is somebody who's in some kind of a relationship with Christ. That's like, that's the idea. What I wanted to get at, Noe, is that we have a phrase. It's a phrase that we use in English, and the phrase is a man of God. That idea of like somebody being a holy person, a man of God. What makes somebody a man of God? Are you just born that way? Do you need to get Brahma's permission? Like, what exactly makes you a Brahmin in that way? So, my first point, Noe, is that a Brahmin, the first meaning of that is that they are somebody that's in some sort of religious relationship with God, Brahma, but then the implicit, the implied meaning is that they are a holy person, that they are like a kind of sacred in some kind of priestly way. That's a Brahmin. And when the Buddha is talking about being a Brahmin, he is not talking about having a relationship with the god Brahma. He's talking about being a holy person. What makes somebody holy in that way? Whereas the word arhat is a pre-Buddhist word, and it's a word that's used by other religions, other Indian religions, not just Buddhism. And arhat is, well, the word is tricky, but the kind of the meaning of it is about being worthy of offerings. It kind of literally means somebody who's worthy, but worthy what? And the implication is that they are worthy of offerings, meaning gifts, dana. And so often an arhat is a Brahmin, meaning if you're a holy person, you're worthy of offerings. So, but the two don't need to be. So all Brahmins are arhats, but not all arhats are Brahmins, would be the kind of the syllogism in that way. Then there's the Buddha, the awakened one. And again, a Buddha is a term that is a pre-Buddhist term. The Buddhists did not make this word up. It is used by the the Jain tradition. It's even used in Hinduism to a certain degree. Buddha is a kind of, well, it means awakened, awakened one. And Buddha, and definitely in Buddhism, Buddha has an implication of like maybe wisdom, intelligence, knowledge. Like the idea of Buddha and awakening is about vipassana. It's about insight, and again, knowledge and wisdom. And I want you to notice that like waking up, being a Buddha, that doesn't have anything to do with Brahma. It doesn't have anything to do with begging for food. It doesn't have anything to do with being worthy of offerings. It's a statement about a kind of level of wisdom. Yeah, Noe? And of course, the Buddha is considered a Brahmin, an Arhat, all of the above in that way. So, all right. Maria.
Hi, thank you. The one that popped out for me was number 51, whose destination is unknown.
Yay.
And it's like, wait, what? A lot of times we talk about, you're certainly, if this or that happens, you're certainly bound for awakening. And we talk about destinations quite a bit, but for me personally, it was like, oh, I guess it was kind of a realization that I guess I've kind of built my life around sort of destinations or goals, something, even if it's like a vague thing out there hanging as a a compass or some kind of I don't know, guide. And the thought of having no destination made me feel completely untethered for a second. And so I want to know what you think about that particular passage.
Oh my gosh, Maria, get ready. I have so many notes already. Um, yeah, this is excellent. Excellent question. I'm so excited about this question. Hold on, I'm just getting a few things together. All right, I can't, there's another passage I want to mention. We'll find it. So, whose destination is unknown. Oh, actually, no. I was looking for the line. It's the exact next line. That idea that whose destination is unknown to devas, spirits, and humans. All right, so that's what we're working with. So, the first thing that I want to mention, this is going to get a little technical. I'm going to try not to get too nerdy. So, if you're a serious Dharma student, then you have heard of Nagarjuna's very famous, kind of his major work, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental verses on the middle way, on the Madhyamaka. And chapter 2, that poem, it's a long poem by Nagarjuna, and it's broken up into a bunch of little chapters. The second chapter is called Gatagata. And Gatagata is a compound term for Gata and Agata. Gata means, well, this is where it gets really tricky. The word gata means to go, to go, like to go away. All right. It's basically, it is the exact opposite of arriving. And then there's going. Gata. Now, the thing about the Sanskrit / Pali word of gata, meaning to go, the word is tricky because it doesn't just mean to go away or to be in a state of go, like moving. In Sanskrit, gata, to go always implies a destination. Like you went somewhere. I'm saying this because in the world of Buddhism, you've encountered this word gata a lot. In the famous Heart Sutra, the mantra at the end is gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. And the gate is the past tense of the word gata. So it's gone. But it's not gone, just gone away. The implication is always gone to nirvana. Now we're going to weave together another word. And what it is that you might be familiar with the fact that the Buddha has 10 names or 10 titles. Actually, it came up even in the sutta tonight. They referenced all 10 titles. The Sublime One, Knower of Worlds, Teacher of Gods and Humans. Well, one of those 10 is Sugata, which means well gone. Remember, su means like, beautiful or wonderful. And so it is a they call the Buddha the beautifully gone one, the wonderfully gone one. All right. Now, the idea of all of this is this is about, it's the reason why I brought up Madhyamaka and Nagarjuna and all of that, because your uneasy feeling, Maria, about like no destination, yeah, that would be nihilism. That would be annihilationism. That would be an extreme view. So there's going to heaven, and then there's not going anywhere, or something like that. So the Buddha, it's not that nirvana is not going somewhere. It's a sugata. It's a subtle, wonderful, beautiful going in that way. And again, the implication is about going to nirvana. All right. I've planted all these seeds. Now let's come back. So the line is, where is the line? Where did our line go? Oh, there it is. So in speaking about a Brahmin, a true Brahmin, the Buddha says, one whose destination is unknown to gods, spirits, and humans. So what that is a reference to is that there is a very, very famous part of the kind of the story of the Buddha. And this is a really important part of the story that we don't talk about enough. In the story of the Buddha, once the Buddha became enlightened, like became a Buddha, it says that all of the devas, all of the gods of the realm of desire, all of the gods of the realm of form, even all of the gods of the formless realm, they all heard that Siddhartha had become an enlightened Buddha. And so they wanted to go make offerings. And so they searched all out throughout the realm of desire, and they couldn't find where he had gone to. Then they searched all throughout the realm of form. They couldn't find where he went. Then they looked all throughout the formless realm, and they couldn't find where he went. Now, the point is that it's not that the Buddha was not exactly, right? But they couldn't find the Buddha in the triple realm. They couldn't find the Buddha in the realm of desire, the realm of form, and the formless realm. And this little part of the story, the fact that the devas couldn't find where the Buddha went, that's what's being referred to here. And what it is it's about understanding what it means to be in, don't say in, but what it means to be in nirvana. And the point is, and I've mentioned this to you before, or I've mentioned this in Dharma doors before, nirvana, especially in the earlier Buddhist tradition, that kind of like that we're reading here, nirvana is very, very much about the realization of anatman or anatta, the realization of no self. And my point is that from day one, from the beginning, the Buddha has always been saying there just isn't a self. Especially the one that we think of, it is an artificial designation. It is just a word in that way. In other words, it's not, and this is what I'm often saying, it's not that there is an ego or a self that needs to be abandoned or gotten rid of. No, there needs to be the realization that there isn't a self. Now, When there's a realization of no self, there's an understanding that there's just no longer the thing that I thought was there. It's no longer there. And it's not in the realm, there's no self, so it can't be in the realm of desire, or the realm of form, or the formless realm. In other words, to put it slightly differently, in ways that I've put before, upadana, clinging or attachment, upadana, or clinging or attachment, is this clinging to what I call a karmic axis. It's a delusional concept, but we have it nonetheless. And what it is, we are only concerned about karma coming out of this, and I only care about karma that comes back to this. If a little piece of karma, meaning if I did something and then the karma comes back and it hits over here, I dodged the bullet. It didn't hit me. It didn't hit the karmic axis. But what if that karmic axis is just a product of the clinging? And it's kind of in a way cutting you off from a reality of a vastly interdependent karmic web. And you only being concerned about this tiny little axis of karma is what has you bound up in samsara. And so when the Buddha obliterates the delusional idea of the karmic axis, it's not that there's nothing going on there. It's just no longer the narrow, clinging karmic axis that you'll find in the realm of desire or the realm of form or even the formless realm. Because remember, if I meditate and I get into the formless realm, and then after the meditation, I'm like, I got into the formless realm. That's the karmic axis at play. And this, by the way, is a beautiful segue to the other beautiful line that this is all tied together, by the way. If you go back a few more stanzas, it says in verse 48, the one who leaves behind all human bonds and has cast off the bonds of heaven, detached from all bonds everywhere. That's well gone. That's the idea of sugata. And it's not that, it's so subtle in that Madhyamaka way. Because it's not, Maria, it is not that kind of negative feeling that there's no destination. Yeah, Maria.
So is it a suggestion about how the destination being, full realization or awakening or enlightenment is not something that can be known, like prajna wisdom, beyond the thinking mind?
Excellent. And even one step further, like the Heart Sutra tells us, it cannot be attained. Attained by what? Attained by who? That's the realization, right? Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Noe. Yeah, so there's a lot of beautiful sections in here. Any other comments or ideas about any of these sections?
I would say a word.
Yes.
I so appreciate that. Couple of things. One, the subtle kind of, again, against the attachment. I really appreciate how you nailed it down, the anti-karma thing. Because in that sense, like in this world that is so fragile with attachments, you cannot even say you're a Buddhist, even if you try to have the common denominator, right? Like, but it's like, no, like, because everything is so clingy and slippery slope, right? So I appreciate the destination, but it's middle way, so subtle, but you frame it very nicely. Yeah, because anyhow, I'm not going to talk more about it, but I really appreciate the passage of perfected hero, and I wonder if it came later or it's an original language. But I appreciate so deeply there that perspective of gone like a perfected hero with that kind of journey behind it, and that symbolic. I don't know if you can talk about what you see of it, but from a storytelling perspective, that kind of was kind of a jewel there for me.
So regarding that, speaking of translation, so there is a tricky word, which is a purusha or a mahapurusha. And purusha can go a few different directions. It has the kind of the one direction it can go is a more masculine warrior type of a vibe. And the other direction it can go is the hero. And I have been leaning more towards the hero side of it. That's the reference here. Yeah, and I think the idea here is that, Noe's question about what is a Brahmin, like what is the actual language there? Of course, what's important to keep in mind, the Buddha is always using this old Indian religious language and like flipping a lot of it on its head. Purusha is a great example of that, where the Buddha is always talking about the Purusha, but not in the way that it would be in a Vedic thing, where the Purusha was the great warrior that defeated the Asuras type of a thing. Whereas in the Buddhist one, what you should know is that in the 10 titles of a Buddha, and this was at the very beginning of the sutta tonight, when the Buddha is called the Bhagavan, the Blessed One, the Arhat, the one worthy of offerings, the Samyak Sambuddha, kind of incomparable Buddha in that way. And then the one is about a Buddha is somebody who is a leader of Purushas. Not just a Purusha, a teacher or leader of heroes in that way. And so that's sort of, it's one of the ways that the Buddhists take this idea of the Purusha and then take it that one step further. By, again, not just calling the Buddha a Purusha, but a teacher or leader of Purushas. So, all right. One thing, where was that? Well, I mean, mainly, I just kind of want to comment on for me, I love a poem like this. I love a sutra like this. I love a poem like this because, yes, the Buddha is talking about what he calls a Brahmin, but if you read between all the lines, they're talking about a Buddha. They're talking about like the goal of Buddhism. And so for me, to hear that the goal of all of this is to be unperplexed, unperturbed, right? That to me, I mean, obviously there's a lot more here, but my point is that this is all very attainable. And maybe not this life or whatever. I don't mean it like, oh, it's so easy. Why aren't we all doing this? I don't mean it like that. I just mean that the description of a being here, for me, is inspiring. Because to me, it's like, oh, That's what we're trying to do? Sign me up. Like, because I would at least would like to be unperturbed and unperplexed in all of these things. So again, I love this poem because it puts the goal, like it clarifies the goal and then shows, like, in a way where it's right there. And where is it? Well, it's in all of this stuff of transcending all ties, right? Leaving behind the duality of delight and discontent, for example. It's all of this language of that kind of renunciation, but all mental renunciation, right? It's so even though I'm a bodhisattva at heart in that way, and I'm very much like nirvana, samsara, kind of beyond the duality of that, but I still like a good Hinayana early Buddhist thing when they talk about the swamp, right? The mire, the swamp, the getting out of the swamp. There's something inspiring about that. And it's like, yeah, it's dualistic. We know, but I don't know. For me, it's sometimes important. Also, by the way, as I was going, as I was going through the poem, I have to tell you that I see why this poem is repeated so many places. This has like everything. I mean, it's got like, it's almost like a complete vocabulary of Buddhism, where if you really start going through all the technical terms, it's got every technical term in that way. It's almost like a complete roadmap. So, very beautiful. Okay, so I realized we hadn't finished the poem, so I'm glad that I realized that. So, that's the Buddha's description of what he calls a Brahmin. All right. And then I'm just going to repeat the very last stanza because it's kind of a junction to the next part. So he concludes all of that by saying, for name and clan are assigned as mere designations of the world. Originating in conventions, they're assigned here and there. For those who do not know this fact, wrong views have long underlain their hearts. Not knowing, they declare to us, one is a Brahmin by birth. One is not a Brahmin by birth, nor by birth not a Brahmin. By action is one a Brahmin. By action is one not a Brahmin. For men are farmers by their axe, and by their axe are craftsmen too. Men are merchants by their axe, and by their axe are servants too. Men are robbers by their axe, and by their axe are soldiers too. Men are chaplains by their axe, and by their axe are rulers too. So that is how the truly wise see karma as it really is. Seers of pratitya samudpata, seers of dependent origination, skilled in action and its results. Action, karma, makes the world go round. Action, karma, makes this generation turn. Living beings are bound by karmic action, like the chariot wheel to the linchpin. Asceticism, the holy life, self-control, and inner training. By this, one becomes a Brahmin. in this supreme Brahmanhood lies. One possessing the triple knowledge, peaceful, with being all destroyed. Know such a person thus, O Vāseṭṭha, as Brahma, as chakra, for those who understand. When this was said, both the Brahmin students Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvaja said to the Blessed One, "Magnificent Master Gotama, magnificent Master Gotama." It's as if somebody had put up something that had been turned upside down, or held up a lamp in the dark, or showed out the way to one who is lost. From today, let Master Gotama remember both of us as lay followers who have gone to him for refuge for life. All right, so it just keeps getting better and better, but at the end there, so first thing I want to mention is the stanza where he says that all of this Brahmin, Kshatriya, the caste system, all of that, all the names and clans and all of that, they're just mere designations by the world, right? They're just conventions. They're assigned here and there. But for those who don't know that, wrong views underlay their hearts. And not knowing, they think one is a Brahmin because of birth. That is a very important insight. I'm often in a way kind of like teaching it myself. It's about understanding that these words and this language, it's like, it's like money and debt. It doesn't exist, but it has a conventional function. But you get into trouble if you forget that. If you start thinking that things actually have value, or if you start thinking that these labels and these names start referring to actual things, that's where you start to get into trouble. But Buddhism isn't saying stop using them as conventions. No, understand that they are conventions. So that's the first thing, the first, I think, important thing. And then what we really want to talk about is this. So if we go back to the beginning of the poem, the Buddha says, when he first starts talking about birth, and he says, I teach you in order or in sequence as they really are. And then at the bottom of this section, it says, so that is how the truly wise see action as it really is. This is the language of Buddhism, of seeing things as they really are. All right. So in the beginning, he was talking about, let's look at birth as it really is. And now at the end, he's saying, let's look at karma as it really is in that way. So that is how the truly wise see action as it really is. Seers of dependent origination, skilled in actions and its results. So, like I said, this poem kind of has everything. And so it even concludes with this little teaching on dependent origination, right? And it's about this idea of karma, karmic action, and karmic consequence. And a Buddha, a seer, is somebody, by the way, this is actually going to go back to Noe's question about what do these specific titles really mean? Well, as far as I've learned, as far as I have found, a Buddha, to technically properly be called a Buddha, means you understand dependent origination. I have seen this other places where like that dependent origination is the essence of Buddha awakening in that way. And so this is about the Buddha saying, and by the way, this idea of seeing karma as it truly is, this is why the Buddha is not agreeing with Vāseṭṭha. Vāseṭṭha thinks of karma in the karmic axis way that I was describing. And that's not how karma really is. Karma, from a Buddhist point of view, is completely impersonal. It's just the giant, web of cause and effect that has no stopping point in that way. So to see that is to see dependent origination in that way. So, all right. Any last comments, questions, or ideas about that last little section? Yeah, no.
Just that second to last, third to last stanza. I have the online version, so it's a little different.
Yep.
Deeds make the world go on. Deeds make people go on. Sentient beings are bound by deeds like a moving chariot's linchpin. Just
Beautiful.
saying what you were saying. It's the, you don't get anywhere by doing more.
Excellent. And also, Noam, that beautiful line, action makes the world go round, or karma. Let's keep in mind, they're always actually talking about karma.
Yeah.
It's important, like it's a subtle point.
Yeah.
But it's that idea of like, so to use my language that I've introduced tonight about the karmic axis,
Yeah.
Even though there is no self in that way, when there is the clinging to the delusional self, it creates that axis, and then that's samsara.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into the like, there is reincarnation, but there's not.
Mm.
There is samsara, but there's not.
Mm.
It's like there is when there is
Mm-hmm.
type of a thing. So I'm glad you highlighted that stanza. All right, everybody. On that note, that will do it for the Vāseṭṭha Sutta. We did another one. Yay.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for this beautiful sutra.
Oh,
So the 262 other references,
yeah.
they're all really just that poem. Is that what I am to understand?
I didn't go look for all 260.
No.
But the few that I went to look at, I noticed that, they have either sections of the poem or the poem in its entirety.
Yeah.
So, whereas, the Vāseṭṭha Bharadavaja backstory is just the way that this one presents it. So.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, everybody. Thanks as always for being here. Appreciate it so much. And I'll be back next Sunday night, and we will probably move on to the next sutra in the Sutta 99, next sutta in the section. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Good night.
Have a great night.
No.